let's talk about this inheritance, the descriptions that are mentioned here in verse 4 related to this inheritance. Okay, 3 things that Peter mentions here: that this inheritance is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading. All right. Now, those are 3 features of our inheritance that are absolutely wonderful, especially when we take into account just how things in this world and even inheritances in the human world and on this side of eternity can't necessarily make pure 100% claims to those 3 characteristics there of being imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, right? Let's think for a moment about this whole thing of our inheritance being imperishable. In other words, it's something that doesn't completely die off. Okay, it's not something that has a temporary shelf life. Let's put it that way. We think about you think about something that's perishable. A lot of times we think about food. Something that's perishable in the food world is something that, might be good quality at first. And then, like, if you leave it out or uneaten or something like that, or something like that, it begins to spoil. Okay. You think about milk, for example. You ever had spoiled milk? Look, it does not taste good at all. Right. Now, when you bought it at the store, it was good. Right. It was very good, and you used it when eating Oreos. You used it in your cereal. You used it in cooking and that sort of thing. But then, once it passed by that date that's stenciled on the milk carton, after a while, it doesn't go completely bad on that date most of the time. But if you leave it after a while, enough time after that date, you take a sip of that, and you're going to gag, maybe throw up, as you spit out the chunks, because it gets chunky and right? The milk is perishable. It doesn't last forever. All right, you're not going to have good quality milk forever after you buy it from the store. There's a limit of time that you have to use that milk to its full potential, right? Okay. And so it doesn't perish. It doesn't die off. Okay. It doesn't get off. We're talking about our spiritual inheritance, and it's saying that it's imperishable. It's something that doesn't spoil. It's something that that doesn't fall by the wayside. It's something that stands perfect all the time. Okay. It stands perfect all the time. Okay. It doesn't perish. It doesn't spoil like we would think of things in this world. Okay. Even when we think about land and things like that, if you leave land that's untreated, grass starts to wither, flowers start to fall off, and that sort of thing. Our inheritance, what we are due to inherit down the road, is not going to be anything that spoils away. It's imperishable. All right. So that's a good feature, right? That's a very good feature. But not only that, but it's undefiled. So if we're talking about something that's undefiled, we're talking about something that is absolutely pure, with no tarnish. It's not tainted in any sort of way. Sometimes we might buy something at the store, and we might realize that it's there's something in it that has tainted the product, where it's not what it should be because of whatever it is that's tainting it, right? There's a lot of things. I mean, just use your imagination of things in this world that we might make use of that, to some degree or another, is tainted. All right. So it's not 100% perfect. It's not 100% pure. Okay. There's some impurities in there that messes up the value of whatever it is that you're dealing with. As it relates to our spiritual inheritance, we're dealing with something different there. It's not, there's nothing that defiles it. There's nothing that within that inheritance that makes our inheritance less perfect. There's nothing in there that makes it impure. There's not anything there in there that puts any sort of mark or blemish in that inheritance. There's zero blemish, zero tainting, zero tarnishing of any sort in our inheritance. Okay, it's undefiled, and there's nothing on the outside that can be brought on the inside that will make it defiled or tarnished or tainted. Okay, it's protected from that sort of thing. You'll understand why as we go on here. But imperishable, undefiled, and unfading. In other words, there's if it's unfading, we're dealing with something where its value does not diminish, and it doesn't depreciate. I use that word depreciate just given my background years ago as an econ major in college, and we were talking about businesses who invest in capital equipment, and the use of that capital. One of the things that happens is depreciation, right? Just the more use of capital equipment, or just any sort of equipment, whether you're talking about in the business world or even if you're talking about household appliances. There's a certain degree of depreciation that happens until after a while, what happens? That machinery gets old. It doesn't function the way that it should because it just breaks down. And so you have to buy new equipment. Maybe if we're talking about clothing, the more that you wash those clothes, maybe you might start to see that the color of it starts to fade. The value starts to depreciate. And so it doesn't have that valuable form that it did before. So that value isn't maintained as it once was before. And so that's what we're talking about here. So when we talk about our inheritance, we get our inheritance 100% pure, undefiled, something that will not spoil. Okay, it won't rot away, and it's not something that's going to depreciate in value. The value, which is perfect, that we get with our inheritance is something that's going to be maintained throughout that whole time. Okay. Now, when we understand that all of this comes from the Lord, we say that, of course, it's like that. Of course, our inheritance, if it's from the Lord and He caused us to be born again into this hope, it shouldn't be a surprise to us that our inheritance is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading. That it shouldn't surprise us at all. And that's the characteristics of our inheritance that we have.